Peace and black power, family. This is your brother Shakim Hotep Arquette. Right Black Action once again. Today I want to talk about the power of eugenics explained. Now when we look at the concept of eugenics, we see that it has to deal with a science that deals with the improvement, as by control of human mating, of hereditary qualities of a race or breed. Now when you begin to understand the concept of eugenics, you will see that it's been utilized and begun or started along the Nile Valley. In the Nile Valley civilizations, we created something that was often referred to as dynasties. Dynasties are families that rule in a particular point in time or a particular period in time where that family puts together a lineage of rulers, and that family teaches each of its members how to take on power and take on leadership and perpetuate it into the next generation. However, when you begin to Google eugenics, all you will see is that it had its birth with the European. Don't be fooled by that, because you have to go a little bit further sometimes when talking about these theories. And it is quite often that they mislead you about where things actually began. But today, when you want to talk about building a sustainable nation, or you want to talk about creating better families, or when you want to talk about creating communities where the people have the ability to become successful, or the people become sovereign, and when you want to talk about family relations and growing and budding into a people that have knowledge of self, knowledge of God, and we are creating kings and queens, this subject is often left out because of the controversial nature of it. But that controversial nature has not been given until you have people like Hitler, who started using eugenics for wrong purposes. And those purposes were to elongate white supremacy. But I want to talk about eugenics from an African-centered perspective and how we can utilize this theory to help us build a nation or a group of people who have the ability to back up our family with an education system that will allow our children to inherit our kingdom or our queendom. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of common sense mathematical expressions to kind of give you a better understanding or a good understanding of eugenics. And from there, you can kind of like add in what you may, or you can subtract what you may, and use it for your own personal gain or the gain of your individual communities that you live in. Now, is it by accident or design that brothers have, and sisters also, are those of us in the black community or melanated community, whatever you want to call it, those of us who are in this society, we are perfect or adept, or we're connoisseurs at breeding pit bulls, at breeding dogs. You will see brothers in the hood or brothers in the country, especially in the country, they have the mental capacity to actually put together certain types of dog to create master breeds. And they will also try hard as hell to make sure that the dog that they have does not breed with a dog that is inferior to what he wants or he has envisioned. So a brother takes perfect pride in creating these bully breeds of pit bulls or terriers or staffers. They make sure that they are able to genetically line up the dogs to where they can make a massive income on these dogs by dog fighting. And brothers have proven to be connoisseurs in doing this, and they have mastered the concept of eugenics when it comes to breeding dogs. And if you understand, this concept of breeding dogs has been passed down from generation of brothers who've given out this information to other brothers in the hood who have masterfully crafted this without even reading a book. But through trial and error, they've come to understand the science of breeding dogs. They have mastered mastered the concept of creating thoroughbreds. Even with horses, you have individuals who have mastered the concept of creating thoroughbred horses who can win races and win big prizes and have big purses at races. And people have put together books like this New Guide to Horse Breeds. Brothers have studied this so that they can actually masterfully craft the perfect horse to be able to win races. But one thing that is not taught is how we can masterfully, as a people, put together a race of people. And I'm going to use that word race because I know it's kind of controversial and we know the origins of it, but I'm going to use it just for this understanding that I want to get. But we have now begun to have all this information on creating or using eugenics to breed animals, but yet we haven't used it to understand how we can breed masterful children who are able to inherit a legacy that we once had and adopted along Nile Valley civilizations, and then use it now to recreate that which we already had, to bring it from the past, take it into the present, and move it along and perpetuate it into the future. And by this lack of understanding how we can eugenically breed our children, we have now come to the situation to where there is a lot of infighting in families, and there's a lot of infighting amongst our people, and the children that we are birthing now have a mental defect, not because of some sort of gene that is in that child, but it is due to the ideologies of the family and the principles of the parents competing against each other, where that child is neglected. So now that child has now been dumbed down, and he's lacking any sort of understanding of knowledge of self or knowledge of God. So I'm not going to limit this, I'm not going to place this in a situation to where we're talking about physical disabilities. I'm talking about a situation to where we are creating and perpetuating mental disabilities. Because even though someone might have some sort of physical impairment, if his mind or her mind is at an aptitude to where they can compete and they understand how to utilize that human potential, no physical impairment can stop that child from doing something that is larger than life. Now, let's look at this. This is our first mathematical equation about eugenics. Look at these young women over here. In the club, drunk, high, sexually exploiting themselves. No knowledge of self, no knowledge of God. They are from a period, they're from a condition in society that has bred a woman who they refer to, not me, they refer to as being thoughts. And they use this term for themselves in glory. They call themselves bitches or sluts. And these breed of women are out here now destroying the fabric of our society. The same thing goes for the brother. Look at him in the hallway, pants sagging, hanging all the way to his knees. He is a product of an environment that has led our young kings to becoming no more than just thugs and niggas and hustlers and gangbangers. And when these two console in each other and they mate with each other, you have at the bottom, they produce a young thug. Most of us have seen that full clip of that young man, pants sagging, cursing, and talking trash to his parents. And when you look at the science of eugenics, when you add 1 plus 1, 100% or 99% of the time, you're going to get that young child right there. And it's due to the marriage of these two principles that our society is now being debased, and we are breeding children that have no understanding of being able to build themselves up. We are breeding children that are finding themselves in prisons. We are breeding children that are finding themselves in a state of homelessness and not having a mother and father around. We are now breeding children that are confused about their sexuality. They are confused about who they are, so they run around in this world aimlessly and lost because the parents don't have the ability to create an environment to nurture that child's true potential. All they do is they digress and they produce a child that is acting in accord with white supremacy. Now, looking at this equation, we're going to add something into it. Now, just say you have these desecrated young women and desecrated young males breeding desecrated children. Now, let's change up the equation. Young women, say that you are a queen, as we have in this picture. You have a queen, and you unite her with a thug. And sometimes we have sisters who put themselves in a situation, even though they're good sisters, they might have their head on right. But then you turn around and you get with these thugs over here, all it's going to produce is a state of disharmony. That is why I have that picture below of the man and woman looking in two opposite paths, because that queen, she wants to be able to give her child the nurturing that they need, and she wants to be able to have a child and raise a child who will begin to see who they are, and they want a child who's going to grow as a leader and excel in the math and sciences of this world that we want to create. She has that ability to take that child and bring something out of them, but yet she's lacking one half of the equation by putting herself in an environment with a man or a brother who has no knowledge of self, no knowledge of God, no knowledge of anything but that old thug street mentality. So what does she do? They have a family environment that is now torn apart, that is torn to pieces, and there's disharmony and disunity. So what type of environment do you think that child is going to be in? And if that child is in an environment to where there's constant conflict, there's constant dissension and discord, you're going to end up raising a child still that has only half of a chance to survive. That child may progress, that child may digress, but it all depends on other outside factors. And hopefully we want that child to be in a situation to where he takes after or she takes after the mother. But sometimes that role of a father is overbearing. And even if that child does not know the father, sometimes he still ends up like that, because the mother has to go out on her own and rear that child and work these long, hard hours while the nigga is in the street doing what he wants to do, getting high and drunk and selling drugs. So that queen now has to take it upon herself to rear multiple children because of the past mistakes that she's been in by dealing with a thug. So now it makes it hard on her. And that little bit of $300-400 that the brother might give her a month, that don't do nothing. That child needs that constant development, that father role in his life 24/7 in order to increase the level of that child being able to rise in this civilization to a level to where our people can achieve dominance. Now let's reverse the roles. Say you have a king, but then that king joins in union with a so-called thought. Something that you met in the club one night that was drunk, and you took her home and had unprotected sex with her. You fell in love with her body. You didn't really fall in love with her mind, but at that moment, all you saw was the outer beauty, and you were seduced by the curves in her waist, and you were seduced by her good looks, and you were seduced by her sex, and now you created a child. So now the father is struggling because there's confusion in that household. Once again, there's confusion between the baby mama and the baby daddy. So now what happens with that? You have this, child support hearings. Because the value system that the mother and the father had are actually at conflict conflict with each other, and when you have a difference in the value system of between a mother and a father, and it's always clashing, then that child once again is placed back in an environment to where this child does not know and understand what they should do. So once again, now you have lessened the likelihood of that child to be able to excel in life because of an environment to where the mother and the father have competing values, and then that king has to constantly live in misery because the mother does not want to let him see the child, or the mother wants to stay out in the club and bring strange men around the child, and the father is steadily going through different things in his life because he is upset that his child has to be subjected to these type of things, and that only brings misery. And see, these situations actually continue white supremacy, because white supremacy essentially is based off of the family being in discord. And white supremacy continues itself by black families not being able to come together and raise children who can take us into that next generation. So now you have this constant infighting. Now let's look at the equation again. But this time, we're going to have that perfect African unity. We have that family structure that has that king and that queen together. And when you have that family structure of the king and queen together, the equivalent of that, or the outcome of that, is where the child is in an environment to where they can learn together. That child is in an environment to where they can have knowledge of self, and they can become reared for leadership, and we can teach these children how to become one with who they really were, and they can become one with the goals of black progression. And if we don't take the time to understand the concept of eugenics, or breeding ourselves with other women or men who have that same ideology of progression, we have that same ideology of black empowerment, we have that same concept of building better communities and families, we have to surround ourselves with these people. We cannot continue to allow our seed to be planted. Men, you cannot allow your seed to be planted in wombs that are polluted. And females, you cannot continually allow yourself, queens, to have your body infected with sperm that has heroin and all kind of drugs inside of that semen. You can't continue to do it. And we are now settling for less. And even if you have to stay single as long as you can until you find that perfect man or that perfect woman that is going to raise or help you raise your child in an African-centered environment, then you need to stay by yourself. Don't just run out and have children with a man or a woman because of their physical attributes. That is not long-lasting. In order for us to be dominant, in order for us to be Pan-Africanists, we have to make sure that we properly practice the science and the art of eugenics. Being able to say, hey, this woman is not fit, or this man is not fit to have my child. That's something that we have to really start saying. We're not saying it in arrogance, but we're saying it because we want to build a nation of rulers. We want to build a nation of children that master economy. We want to build a nation of people that have mastered the sciences of life. We want to build a nation of people that have the ability to understand how we can overthrow a system of colonizers that have been over us for hundreds of years. And in order for us to actually do that, we have to make sure our practice of eugenics is pure and perfected. We no longer can allow ourselves to begin to settle for less. And that is why it's important that we hammer this concept home time after time after time again. Because if we don't hammer this concept home into our people, then we will continue to produce children that are no more than drug dealers and hoes and pimps and hustlers. And it's time to break that cycle, family. There's a lot more to this concept. I just wanted to give you a basic understanding of how we should look at this subject and then take it and use it to make sure that we can create a legacy for our people that we can pass down. Because before we can start talking about wresting power from the enemy, we have to look at the family structure and the education that's being given in the family structure and putting forth a legacy or a generation of children who are able to take back the power that the demon has stole from us. Peace and Black Power, family. Shakim Amenhotep Arquette, the power of eugenics. South Carolina RBG, I'm out. Peace.